Hey there, stringers. This is Voodoo Stick Mod, and we today are going to make another Stuffie. Today we're going to be doing the 6x10 lion mascot Stuffie. He has a special video because his applique is a little bit different. He has an applique you have to cut both the inside and the outside. There aren't a whole lot of these, but this guy's a little special that way. So we're going to take a look at our color stop sheet. Our first color stop is our die line, and the color of the thread listed is the suggested color of the fabric that you're going to use for the base of the lion. Then it's going to do a detail stitch for his tail. Then we're going to get into the two applique steps. There's going to be a placement step, which that color stop suggestion is what she suggests for your main fabric color. Then there's a tack down for the applique. Then there's a bunch of detail stuff, and then before the very last color stop, we're going to add our back. So let's go over a few things we're going to need besides knowing our colors. We're going to need some fabric. I'm going to be using minky fabric. A lot of people hate it. I love it. It is a mess. It's almost as bad as glitter, except your craft herpes are fluffy. So I have two different colors of that for my lion. I'm going to need some medium cutaway, medium to heavy cutaway. I'm going to need some plasticky water-soluble stabilizer. I'm going to need a rotary cutter to cut my fabric pieces before I place them. I have some double curved scissors that I like to use for cutting applique, but you can use duckbills if you prefer them. I have a pair of tweezers and snips for snipping any jump stitches or thread tails. I have pins because I prefer to pin certain things down. You don't have to pin. You can use tapey tape. You can, for the setting the main fabric down, you can use some basting spray. I think that's about all we need until we get to the very end, and then we're going to need a needle and thread to sew them up, and we might need some hemostats to help in turning, some sort of pokey outie tool, and stuffing since we're making a Stuffie. So I'm going to put my hoop on my machine, and I'm going to run my first color stop to give me my die line for my initial fabric placement. Okay, folks, we're back. I've run the die line for my fabric placement. I turned mine in the hoop because I prefer to stitch them in this direction. I'm going to grab my first piece of fabric, and like I said, I'm using minky. So one thing I have to be careful of is there's a nap on this fabric. So if I push one way, it looks like this. If I push the other way, it smooths out. Now I want that smoothed down to go in the direction from head to foot on my design here. So I'm just going to give a couple of quick sprays just to hold this in place. And I'm just checking to make sure I have all my die line covered, smooth it out. Then I'm going to take some of my water-soluble stabilizer and place it on there. Now I do this, some people don't put this down before they do an applique, but he has tail detail he's going to stitch first, and I also think that it makes it easier, for me anyway, to cut around the applique if this is between the base fabric and my applique, because Minky's fluffy. And this way I don't trim off the fluff. Okay, that pin is super dull, so I'm going to grab another one. And I'm just pinning my water-soluble stabilizer down. I'm not pinning it to really hold the fabric in place because I use the basting spray for that. But I think my water-soluble tends to stay in place better if I pin it than if I use tape to stick it down. But you can use tape. If you want to use tape, you can use tape. So now I'm going to put this back on the machine, and I'm going to run color stops 2 and 3, which will do the detail for his little tail. And then it's going to give me the placement line for my applique piece. So we will be back after color stop 3. Okay, we are back, and as you can see, it stitched the detail for the tail, and then it put a placement stitch for the applique fabric. So I'm just going to measure to see 6. What size piece I'm going to need. I did not pre-cut this one. So I'm just going to pop over here and cut a piece of fabric. And then I'm going to, once again, I'm checking for direction of the nap. And then I'm going to lay this over, making sure I cover everything. And I'm going to pin it. You could tape it. I'm going to pin it because I'm told that it's not safe for me to use my fingers to hold it in place while the machine stitches away. So I'll use pins for the demonstration. Okay, so now I've got that all set in place. Now I'm going to put it back on the machine, and I'm going to run color stop 4. Yes, color stop 4, and that is going to give me my tack down stitches. And then we'll be back and I'll show you how to cut this out. Okie dokie, we are back, and it has stitched the tack down for the applique. And I'm going to unpin that part of the design, or of the fabric. And now I'm going to get my scissors. Now you can use whatever scissors you want. I like double curves. You can use duckbills. The thing that makes this applique a little trickier is we don't just need to cut around the outside. We need to cut out this part for his face. So I'm going to kind of pull up on my fabric a little bit and just kind of get my scissors in there, because I don't want to cut through the underlying fabric. I just want to cut the applique fabric, which is another reason why I put the water soluble down in there. It helps a little bit as far as not cutting off the fluff of the underlying fabric that will be his face. And then I'm just going to trim, just like you would any other applique, around for the inside of this design. Trying to be careful that I don't snip my tack down stitches. If I catch a few, it's okay, but I don't want to, excuse me, I don't want to snip a bunch. All right, so it looks like I got the inside part all trimmed up nicely. I'm just checking, make sure there aren't any areas where I kind of want to go back. Excuse me, it's kind of dry in my house today, which is very rare for Tennessee in the summer. Now that the inside's cut out, I'm just going to trim around the outside of this applique, just like a normal traditional applique would be trimmed. So getting right up next to those stitches without snipping them, carefully trimming around. He's got a lot of nooks and crannies in his mane. He has a lot of nooks and crannies in his mane, but none of them are super difficult or tight to get into, so that's nice. And I'm just kind of putting gentle pressure on my fabric so that I get a nice cut to the edge there. almost done. Okay, so that's all trimmed. And Mickey is fun stuff, let me tell you. Okay, now that I got that all moved away, I'm going to actually pull this piece of WSS off. I'm going to pull this out of the inside. It's a weird day here because my WSS is a little difficult to pull because it has been humid, but it's dry in my house because of the air conditioning. Okay, and then I'm going to pull this off. Now, I'm not going to leave it like that. I'm going to put a new piece on because there are design areas in here, so I want to cover that up. But if I just threw a second piece on here, it would have a double in here, and there's a lot of tiny areas to get it out of in here, and I don't want to have to deal with that. So I'm just going to put a fresh piece on. Pinning it into my corners. This up, gets fluff out of there. Okay, so now that's all repinned. Now I'm going to put this back on my machine, and I'm going to run color stops 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So everything except for the very last one. Then we'll come back and put the back on and sew it up. So put this back on the machine and run everything that's left except for the last color stop. Okay, we are back. And we have all the detail work stitched out. I'm going to cut the couple of jumps that there are in this one that I have to cut. Okay. All right, now I'm going to unpin my water-soluble stabilizer. And I'm going to take this off. Okay. And then I'm going to use my tweezers to just kind of get in here. Some of this stuff started so that I can pick it out. There's some tight spots in here, so it can be a little tricky in some spots, but if you can't get it all, that's okay. You can either take a damp paper towel and place it over the top and then press a warm iron on it and then peel off the paper towel. And that usually gets most of it, but if that doesn't work, you can always, after you finish putting the back on and then turning it, you can always throw it in this rinse cycle on the washer before you stuff it, and that will get the rest out. This size isn't too bad. The smaller sizes can be trickier to get all the little areas out. A lot lot of times I just take my tweezers and just kind of run it along one edge, and that helps give me a bigger piece to grab onto. That's up here. The eyes. Almost done. Just this last little bit right there. Okay. All right, so I got all the WSS off, it looks like. And like I said, I can always throw it in the washer after I get the back on, or I can use the paper towel and the warm iron trick. All right, now I'm gonna test my Minky, make sure I got it going the right way. I'm gonna place this on top, pretty side to pretty side, and then I am going to pin it around the edges. Again, you can use tape. Sorry, I had a pin in my mouth. Boy, I got a lot of dull pins in this batch. Just make sure if you pin from the top, you don't want the pin heads dragging on the bottom of the frame. All right, now I'm going to put this back on the machine, and I'm going to run the final color stop, and then we will be back. Okay, we are back again, and I'm just going to pull these pins out, and then I'm going to unhoop this, and I'm going to use my rotary cutter. I'm just taking off the excess to make it easier to handle when I trim around. Okay. All right, so I got all that. Now I'm going to trim around, and the first thing I want to do is where the opening is. I'm just going to cut up to, but not through the stitching. Okay, that's going to give me tabs to tuck in after I turn it. And now I'm just going to trim around it. I'm using pinking shears, but you can use regular scissors if you prefer. We are going to need some regular scissors in a minute to clip some curves, but I will show you that when I'm done cutting out. Okay, almost done. Okay, all right, so that's all trimmed. Now I'm going to grab my regular scissors, and anywhere there's a dip in like that, I'm going to just snip up to that curve. But I'm not going through the stitching. I'm just going up to it, and that's going to make those areas turn out better. They're not going to bunch up. They'll give you a better seam. And you really want to do the deep corners like that, or curves, but any inner curve, it will help. All right, I think I got them all. Okay, now we're going to turn it, and I just stick my thumb up in there and kind of pinch it between my thumb and my finger, and then I use my finger to push in, and get it started through the opening. And then I just kind of scrunch it like a burrito and tug till I get it out. Okay. All right, it's mostly turned. Now I'm going to grab my tool to poke out my corners, and I just have a chunk of a dowel, or chopsticks work really well for this. And I take mine and I just kind of run it right along the seam on the inside. Then that way I know that it's getting all those little twists and turns and all the nooks and crannies. Oops, I'm not even on camera. You can't even see that. So yeah, I'm just running my dowel along the seam that I can feel in there when I'm poking. Okay, get that part. That looks like it needs to come out of it. All right, and those are my tabs. Get that pushed out. Okay. All right. I'm just gonna take this tab, the stabilizer only, and I'm gonna trim that down because that can kind of be annoying when I'm trying to stuff it. It can get in the way. Okay. So that's all turned. Now, like I said, if you have a bunch of WSS that's stuck in all sorts of tight corners, now is the time when you could throw this through the rinse cycle in the washer, and that'll help get all that off. There. There, that's better. Okay, now I have stuffing, and I'm going to, I just like to give it a little shred just to kind of fluff it up a bit. And then I'm going to open my turning hole and just start feeding in the stuffing. And you kind of want to get your finger, or you can use, again, you can use your chopstick to kind of push the fluff up into all those corners. Just kind of pushing stuff up in there. Pushing it around. Okay. And you just keep feeding the fluff, the stuffing in. And I try to feed it, when I'm feeding in the stuffing, I try to push it to all the outer areas, kind of around the edges first, to get in all those little spaces. Because otherwise it fills in the inside, and then you got to try to sneak stuff into the outside. And it's easier if at the end you just have to kind of fill in the center. So I'm just kind of using my finger to maneuver stuff around in here so it's pushed to the outside edges. Fill in the feet corners here. Looks like we need a little more pushed up toward the tail. That. you can be the judge of how full or not full you want your Stuffie to be. I think I need just a teeny bit more, so I'm going to tuck in my tabs because I'm just about done here. And then I'm just going to push in this last little bit. And then I just kind of squish stuff around to make sure there aren't any spots where I feel I need to get back in. And then the tabs, you tuck them in. Okay. And then you can either whip stitch or ladder stitch this closed. I prefer a ladder stitch, but it's your personal preference. But I always start from the inside, not from the outside, then it hides the knot. And I'm just taking little stitches along. Now, this is tucked in, so this is like a folded edge of fabric. And I'm just taking a little stitch along one edge, going across, taking a little stitch along that edge. That's called a ladder stitch. And this is going to give you a pretty invisible seam here, because I'm not pulling it tight just yet. I'm just going across and getting those stitches in. And now that I'm at the end, I can tug and it'll pull everything together. And then you can barely see that stitch line. Then I'm going to knot this off. I just need to straighten my threads out a little bit, because the way I knot, if they're all sorts of twisty, it doesn't work very well. All right, tied my knot. Now I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to stitch up in like this, and this will bury your thread tails up inside your Stuffie, and that makes it harder for your knot to come undone because it has nice long tails in there. But if you pull tight, when you snip it off, the tails will retract back into your Stuffie, and then you won't see it, the tail sticking out. Okay, now clearly he needs a little bit of lint rolling here to get some of the lint from the stuffing off here. Oh, and I think I have a thread tail there. Yep, I do. Okay. Alrighty, he's all done. And that is how you make the lion mascot applique Stuffie. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us through the Facebook group, and hopefully you have fun making your Stuffies.